Now, what does that mean? It means, is it just like where we start out from? And if it is, there's no point making the trip. Because once you obliterate the material dimension, the distance between two places, as I say, they become the same place. If I offer you a banana, you will be very unsatisfied if I offer you just the two ends of the banana. What you want is the substance between. In the same way, when you consider a great many of our products, automobiles that are essentially toy rocket ships with built-in obsolescence, when you consider fabrics that we use, which fall apart in a hurry, what are we really doing? We say we're practical, but we're not. We're abstractionists, almost like the scholastics, because we are making surfaces with not much underneath them. This is a great way of making money, because it's really cheating. When you go into the grocery business and you manage to make all kinds of imitation food and then inject chemicals and sell people styrofoam instead of bread, well, yes, you may make lots of money. You can also cheat on the packaging by reducing the quantity and making the exterior look very attractive with color photography. And so, but the difficulty is that when you've made all this money, you have nothing to buy with it except other people's inferior products. You have to go outside the country, back to peasants and people like that, who took joy in their work and had a material relationship to it. So this is a serious puzzle, and it all goes hand in hand with an attitude to education that is too abstract, too scholastic, too much in the head and too little in the belly. Lao Tzu says in his book, "The energies of the emperor should be directed to keeping the minds of the people unpreoccupied and their bellies well filled," which seems an extraordinary attitude for a mystic. You would think he would be all up in the mind. But the contrary is the case. Great mystics are very well related to the physical world. We think of Saint Teresa of Avila, of the Zen masters, of great Chinese mystics who were also artists, and Hindu mystics who had the most fantastic methods of physical culture. And you realize that the attitude of mysticism is not at all, when you really come down to it, anti-worldly, or as Ing calls it, acosmistic. This is a superstition. Just because they use negative language and may refer on occasion to the world as a maya, or illusion, we forget that the word maya, for example, also means art, magic, and skill. And it isn't necessarily the point of Hindu spiritual endeavor at all to get rid of one's experience of the world. It may be in some particular emphases of it, some particular schools, but you can't make that a generalization by any means. Furthermore, you will remember that in the most influential form of Buddhism, which is called the Mahayana, that the whole point is that when you've attained enlightenment, instead of going off and disappearing forever into some undiscoverable nirvana, the whole point is that you, as a bodhisattva, come back to work in the world. And that is why Mahayana has been so creative on the artistic level. So there is a very strong bond, you see, between the mystical approach and the empirical approach, since both are interested in experience, and insofar as one realizes the fundamental unity of the cosmos, there is a tendency to do away with the dualism of the spiritual and the physical. I'll never forget when D.T. Suzuki was at the World Congress of Faiths in London in 1936. We had a kind of final round-up lecture in Queen's Hall. And the subject was that several representatives of various traditions were going to talk on the supreme spiritual ideal. Well, one person got up and another person got up and delivered themselves of incredible quantities of hot air. Finally, little old Suzuki got to his feet and said, "I am asked to talk about supreme spiritual ideal. Now I am countryman from very far off place. I do not know what supreme spirit or ideal is. I look it up in the dictionary, but I do not understand this at all. Then he went on to give a description of his house and garden in Japan. And just everybody gave him a standing ovation. It wasn't exactly what he said, it was his attitude. And of course, he did say in the course of his observations that what we needed more than anything else was an attitude to life in which the spiritual and the material were inseparable, because otherwise, what influence on the material could the spiritual have? It's the old problem, you know, of if you are made of two parts, one spiritual and the other physical, how does the spiritual part move the physical part, since all good ghosts walk straight through brick walls and don't disturb the bricks? So, in this way, then, when you look back to the origins of Western science, you find that concern for what is to be found by the observation, by getting involved in the physical universe, was of interest to the same people who were interested in an experimental approach to religion. One thinks particularly of that Cardinal Nicholas Cusanus, who was interested in all sorts of scientific investigation, and at the same time wrote the Doctor Ignorantia, the book called Learned Ignorance. He used it in the sense of unknowing, like the cloud of unknowing, and he was primarily concerned with the whole problem of the relationship of opposites or polarities. He was one of the great thinkers on that subject. So, therefore, it seems to be that a serious study of the psychology of religions and of their symbolisms must involve both a literary approach and an experimental approach. It is precisely for lack, you see, of an experimental approach that a great deal of religion and also philosophy and traditional metaphysics has become of so little interest to young people in particular. They want to go further. And this is why young people are to such a great extent interested in expanding or altering their consciousness. It isn't a question of looking for kicks. You know, we don't take young people very seriously. And when they do something like that, we always say, oh, boys will be boys, they're looking for kicks. And yet, let's say people of the same age can be sent off on the highly responsible job of fighting in Vietnam. You just can't have it both ways. If they are responsible enough, mature enough to go and fight our battles, we should allow them some say in the deep and important matters of life. So it is a very puzzling question, though, as to how one might engage in the study of religion experimentally with a scientific attitude and do it within the framework of the academic community as we know it. Because, you see, the moment you start experimenting with it, you are suspect of being goofy. It's all very well for Professor X to be a Sanskritist and to know all about Vedic literature and the commentaries on the Gita and have all this at his fingertips. But the moment it's known that he's practicing yoga and that he's got some scientific apparatus to measure the EEG effects of his breathing and of his states of concentration, so the man's off his rocker because he's getting into this non-verbal exploration. But this is, once again, though, a renaissance of scholasticism that would make this sort of criticism. People tend to think that the attitude of science makes it perfectly clear that there is nothing more to life than a pilgrimage from the maternity ward to the crematorium. That's what there is. And in this new theology of the death of God, This attitude is exploding into theological circles, many, many years behind the times, one might say, and suggesting that we've really got to face up to it after all, that religion is wishful thinking, there isn't anybody up there who cares, and that life is just what we see it to be. It is banal. It is just this so-called practical world, and that we've got to deal with that.